This week's Torah portion begins in Genesis 18:1 and is entitled Vayera. Then Adonai appeared to him at Mamre's large trees while he was sitting in the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. When he lifted up his eyes to see, suddenly 3 men were standing right by him. When he saw them, he ran from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed down to the ground. Then he said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in your eyes, please do not pass by your servant. Please let a little water be brought so you can wash your feet and make yourselves comfortable under the tree. And let me bring a bit of bread so that you can refresh yourselves. Then you can pass on, since you have passed by your servant." They said, "Do just as you have said." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, knead 3 measures of fine flour and prepare bread loaves." Then to the herd Abraham ran and took a young ox, tender and good, and he gave it to the servant who prepared it quickly. Then he took butter and milk and the young ox that he had prepared and set it before them. While he was standing by them under the tree, they ate. Then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" "There in the tent," he said. Then he said, "I will most surely return to you in about a year's time. Surprisingly, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped having the way of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I've grown decrepit, can I have desire, and my Lord so old?" Then Adonai said to Abraham, "Why is it that Sarah laughed, saying, 'Can I really give birth when I am so old?' Is anything too difficult for Adonai? At the appointed time I will return to you in about a year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh," for she was afraid. But he said, "No, for you did laugh." Then the men got up from there and looked down over Sodom. Abraham was walking with them to send them off, when Adonai said, "Should I keep secret from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham will most certainly become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed? For I have made myself known to him, so that he will command his sons and his household after him to keep the way of Adonai by doing righteousness and justice, so that Adonai may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him." Then Adonai said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great indeed, and their sin is very grievous indeed. I want to go down now and see if they deserve destruction, as its outcry has come to me, and if not, I will know." Then the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham was still standing before Adonai. Abraham drew near and said, "Will you really sweep away the righteous and the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you really sweep away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to cause the righteous to die with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked share the same fate. Far be it from you. Shall the judge of the whole world not exercise justice?" Then Adonai said, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous people within the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham answered and said, "Look, pray, I have decided to speak to my Lord though I am dust and ashes. Suppose the 50 righteous people are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." So he spoke to him yet again and said, "Perhaps 40 will be found there." And he said, "I will not do it for the sake of the 40. Then he said, "Please let my Lord not be angry, so I may speak. Perhaps 30 will be found there." And he said, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Then he said, Look, pray, I have decided to speak to my Lord. Perhaps 20 will be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, Please, let not my Lord be angry, so I may speak once more. Perhaps 10 will be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. Now, when he had finished speaking to Abraham, Adonai left, and Abraham returned to his place. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening while Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. Then he said, Here, please, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house. Spend the night and wash your feet. Then you can get up early and go on your way. But they said, No, we will spend the night in the open plaza. But he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him. They came into his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked matzot, and they ate. They had not yet lain down when the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, from youth to elderly, all the people without exception. And they called out to Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we have relations with them. But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him, and said, Please, my brothers, don't act wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who haven't been intimate with a man. Please let me bring them out to you. Do to them whatever is good in your eyes. However, do nothing to these men, since they have come under the protection of my roof. Get out of the way, they said. And they said, This one came as an outsider and dares to judge. Now we'll treat you worse than them. So they strongly pressed against the man Lot and moved in close to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. Then they struck the men at the doorway of the house with blindness, from youth to elderly, so that they gave up trying to find the doorway. Then the men said to Lot, Who else related to you is still here? A son-in-law, your sons, and your daughters, whoever else is related to you in the city, bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place, because their outcry has become so great before Adonai that Adonai has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were going to marry his daughters. Get up, he said, get out of this place, for Adonai is about to destroy the city. But in the eyes of his sons-in-law, he was like a joker. So when morning dawned, the angels rushed Lot, saying, Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be swept away with the city's iniquity. But he hesitated. So the men grabbed his hand, his wife's hand, and his 2 daughters' hands, because of Adonai's compassion for him, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. When they brought them outside, one said, Flee for your life, do not look behind you, and do not stop anywhere in the surrounding area. Escape to the hills, or else you will be swept away. But Lot said to them, No, my lord, please. Look, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have magnified your merciful loyalty, which you have shown by letting me live. But I can't escape to the hill country, for the disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, please, this city is close enough to flee there, and it's little. Please let me escape there. Isn't it small? And let me live. So he said to him, Behold, I will grant your request concerning this matter too, not to demolish the city which you have spoken. Hurry, flee to safety there, because I cannot do anything until you arrive. This is why the town is named Zoar. The moment the sun rose upon the land, Lot entered Zoar, and Adonai rained sulfur and fire upon Sodom and Gomorrah from Adonai out of the sky. So he demolished these cities and the whole surrounding area, all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation of the ground. But his wife looked behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Now Abraham rose early in the morning to the place where he stood before Adonai. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward the entire land of the surrounding area, and saw, behold, the smoke of the land ascended like smoke from a furnace. So it was, as God destroyed the cities of the surrounding area, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the upheaval, when he demolished the cities where Lot had dwelt. Then Lot went up from Zoar and dwelled on the mountain, his 2 daughters with him, because he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. So he lived in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. Then the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is no man in the land to come to us, as is the custom of the whole land. Come on, let's make our father drink wine, so that we can lie with him and keep the seed of our father alive. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn came and lay down there with their father. Yet he did not know that she lay down and got up. On the following day, the firstborn said to the younger, See, I slept with my father last night. Let's make him drink wine tonight as well. Come on, sleep with him, so that we'll keep the seed of our father alive. So they made their father drink wine that night as well. And the younger got up and lay down with him, and he did not know that she was laying down and got up. So Lot's 2 daughters became pregnant by their father. Then the firstborn gave birth to a son, and named him Moab. He is the ancestor of the Moabites to this day. The younger also gave birth to a son, named him Ben-Ami. He is the ancestor of the sons of Ammon to this day. Then Abraham journeyed from there to the land of the Negev, and settled between Kadesh and Shur, while he was dwelling as an outsider in Gerar. Abraham said to Sarah his wife, She is my sister. So King Abimelech of Gerar sent for and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream at night and said to him, Behold, you are as good as dead, because of the woman whom you have taken, since she is a married woman. Now Abimelech had not come near her, so he said, My Lord, will you slay a nation even though innocent? Didn't he say to me, She's my sister? And she herself even said, He's my brother. I did this with integrity of my heart and guiltlessness of my hands. Then God said to him in a dream, Yes, I myself knew that you did this with integrity of your heart. So I myself, prevented you from sinning against me. This is why I did not allow you to touch her. So now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and let him pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, know that you will surely die, you and all who are yours. Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all his servants, and spoke all these words in their ears, and the men were very frightened. Then Abimelech called to Abraham and said to him, What have you done to us, and how have I sinned against you, that you brought great sin upon me and my kingdom? You've done to me things that should not be done. Abimelech also said to Abraham, What motivated you to do this thing? Abraham said, Because I thought there is certainly no fear of God in this place, so they'll kill me because of my wife. And besides, she really is my sister. She's my father's daughter, though not my mother's daughter. Then she became my wife. So when God made me wander away from my father's house, I said to her, This is your loyalty that you must show me. In every place we go, say of me, He is my brother. Then Abimelech took sheep, cattle, male slaves, and female slaves, and gave them to Abraham, and returned his wife Sarah to him. Then Abimelech said, Look, my land is before you. Dwell wherever it pleases you. At the same time, he said to Sarah, Look, I've given 1,000 shekels to your brother. Look, It is compensation for everything that happened. So to everyone with you, you are vindicated." Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female slaves so that they could bear children. For Adonai had completely locked up every womb in Abimelech's household because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Then Adonai visited Sarah just as he had said, and Adonai did for Sarah just as he had spoken. So Sarah became pregnant and gave birth to a son, Abraham, in his old age, at the appointed time that God had told him. Abraham named his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Then Abraham circumcised Isaac, his 8-day-old son, just as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac, his son, was born to him. So Sarah said, "God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." She also said, "Who would have said to Abraham, 'Sarah has nursed children, for I have given birth to a son in his old age.'" The child grew and was weaned. Abraham made a big feast on the day Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, making fun. So she said to Abraham, "Drive out this female slave and her son, for the son of this female slave will not be an heir with my son, with Isaac." Now the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's eyes on the account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be displeased about the boy and your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her voice. For through Isaac shall your seed be called. Yet I will also make the son of the slave woman into a nation, because he is your seed." So Abraham got up early in the morning and took bread and skin of water and gave them to Hagar, putting them on her shoulder and the child, and sent them away. She went and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water from the skin was finished, she abandoned the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat herself down opposite, about a bow shot away, for she had said, "I can't bear to see the child dying." So she sat down opposite and lifted up her voice and wept. Then God heard the boy's voice, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. And he said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, because God has heard the boy's voice where he is. Get up, lift the boy up, and hold on to him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the water skin and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew. He dwelled in the wilderness and became an archer. He dwelled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Now it came about at that same time that Abimelech, with Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do. So now make a pledge to me here by God that you will not violate your word with me or with my descendants or with my offspring. As I have shown loyalty to you, show the same to me and to the land in which you have lived as an outsider." Abraham said, "I make a pledge." Now Abraham had rebuked Abimelech because of the well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. So Abimelech said, "I don't know who did this thing, nor did you tell me, nor did I hear about it until today." Then Abraham took a flock of sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. Abraham set 7 young ewe lambs apart from the flock of the sheep by themselves. Abimelech said to Abraham, "What do these 7 ewe lambs that you've set by themselves mean?" He said, "You are to accept the 7 ewe lambs from my hand, so that they be a witness for me that I dug this well." This is why that place is named Beersheba, because there both of them made a pledge, and they made a covenant in Beersheba. Then Abimelech got up with Phicol, the commander of his army, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. Then he planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and called there on the name of Adonai, the everlasting God. He lived as an outsider in the land of the Philistines for many days. Now it was after these things that God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, Hineni, he said. Then he said, Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains about which I will tell you. So Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. He split wood for the burnt offering, and got up and went to the place about which God had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place from a distance. Abraham said to his young men, Sit yourselves down here with the donkey. As for me and the young man, we'll go over there, worship, and return to you. Then Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on Isaac his son. In his hand he took the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Then Isaac said to Abraham his father, My father. Then he said, Here I am, my son. He said, Look, here's the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself a lamb for a burnt offering, my son. The 2 of them walked on together. Then they came to the place about which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there, laid out the wood, bound up Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of Adonai called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Hineni. Then he said, Do not reach out your hand against the young man. Do nothing to him at all. For now I know that you are one who fears God. You did not withhold your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted up his eyes, and behold, there was a ram just caught in the thick bushes by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham named that place Adonai Yuri, that is to say, on the mountain Adonai will provide. The angel of Adonai called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I swear, it is a declaration of Adonai, because you have done this thing, and you did not withhold your son, your only son. I will richly bless you and bountifully multiply your seed like the stars of heaven and like the sand that is on the seashore, and your seed will possess the gate of his enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because you obeyed my voice. Then Abraham returned to his young men, and they got up and went together to Beersheba. Then Abraham dwelled in Beersheba. Now it was after these things that it was told to Abraham, Look, Milcah has also borne sons to Nahor your brother. Uz his firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Yidlaph, and Bethuel. Then Bethuel fathered Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, also bore Tebah, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacab. This week's readings from the prophets comes from 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 37. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant my husband is dead. You know that your servant feared Adonai. Now the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves. What should I do for you? Elisha asked her. Tell me, what do you have in the house? She replied, Your handmaid has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. Then he said, Go borrow for yourself vessels from all your neighbors, empty jars, not just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and behind your sons, and pour into all those vessels, setting aside what is full. So she left him and shut the door behind her and behind her sons. They kept bringing the vessels to her, and she kept pouring. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. But he said to her, There isn't another vessel. So the oil stopped. Then she came and told the man of God. So he said, Go sell the oil and pay your debt. Then you and your sons can live on the rest. One day, when Elisha passed through Shunem, where there was a prominent woman who persuaded him to eat some food, and so it was, whenever he passed through, he would stop for a meal. Then she said to her husband, Behold now, I realize that this man who often passes through is a holy man of God. Please, let's make a little walled room on the roof, and let's put there a bed, a table, a chair, and a lampstand for him. Then whenever he comes to us, he can stay there. One day he came there and retired to the upper chamber and lay down there. Then he said to Gehazi, his servant, Call this Shunammite woman. When he had called her, she stood before him. He said to him, Tell her, Behold, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What can be done for you? Can something be communicated to the king or to the commander of the army for you? She answered, I am living among my own people. So he asked, Then what should be done for her? Then Gehazi answered, In fact, she has no son, and her husband is old. Call her, he said. And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway. Then he said, At this season next year you will be embracing a son. But she said, No, my lord, do not lie to your handmaid, man of God. Nevertheless, the woman conceived and bore a son during that season the following year, just as Elisha had told her. Now when the child was grown, one day he went out to his father among the reapers. Then he said to his father, My head, my head. So he said to his servant, Carry him to his mother. So he picked him up and brought him to his mother. The child sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She then went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door on him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, Please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back. But he said, Why are you going to him today? It is neither new moon nor Shabbat. But she said, I will be well. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, Move on, don't slow down riding unless I tell you. So she set out and came near the man of God at Mount Carmel. Upon seeing her from a distance, the man of God said to his servant Gehazi, Look, there's the Shunammite. Please run now to meet her and ask her, Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the boy? She answered, It is well. But when she arrived at the mountain, up to the man of God, she caught hold of his feet. Then Gehazi stepped forward to push her away. But the man of God said, Leave her alone, for her soul is bitter within her. Yet Adonai has hid it from me and has not told me. Did I ask my Lord for a son? She said. Didn't I say, Don't deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, Gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, don't greet him, or if anyone greets you, don't answer him, and lay my staff on the face of the child. But the mother of the child said, As Adonai lives, and as you live, I won't leave you. So he arose and followed her. Gehazi passed on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was no sound or response. So he returned to meet him and told him, saying, the boy was not awakened. When Elisha entered the house, there was the child dead and laying on his bed. So he entered and shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to Adonai. Then he got up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands, and he stretched himself upon him. So the flesh of the child became warm. Then he stepped down and walked in the house to and fro, and then he got up on the bed and stretched himself on him. The child sneezed 7 times. Then the child opened his eyes. He then called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. So he called her. When she came in to him, he said, pick up your son. She came, fell at his feet, and bowed down to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. This week's gospel reading comes from Luke 17, verses 28 through 37. It was just the same in the days of Lot. They were eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting, building. But on the day Lot left Sodom, it rained fire and sulfur from heaven and destroyed them all. Things will be the same on the day when the Son of Man is made fully known. In that day, the one who is on the roof and his possessions in the house must not go down to take them away. In the same way, the one who is in the field must not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever tries to keep his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. I tell you, on that night there will be 2 in one bed. One will be taken along and the other left. There will be 2 women grinding at the same place. One will be taken and the other left. Where, Lord? They replied. And he said to them, where there is a corpse, there also will the vultures be gathered. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.